how are digital platforms changing the reading experience?
So, I think users are telling the publishers where they want to read, and the platforms have to follow. And there's also a proliferation of platforms, which means that, or there's a proliferation of devices. So the platforms have to make sure that they're on those devices or come up with a solution that can make them scale effectively. And I think that given that digital rights management is still a reality in the industry, it really is the platform's responsibility to figure out how to get that content to the user, because they can't just let the user sort it out themselves. And so, from Google's perspective, we really want to deliver on a read anywhere message, and so we've come up with applications which are what users expect on certain platforms, but that didn't get us enough reach, and so we really look to the web, which I think has solved this problem already, in terms of come up with content and bring it to everybody wherever they are, and so having the web reader really helps us get that answer out.
Sure. So you mentioned apps and web.
Yep.
Do you have a sense of, at this point, are more people accessing that information through apps, or are they accessing your information through the web?
Yes, that's a great question, and we had hypotheses, and now we've tested them, and it's a lot of fun. What we've discovered is that people use whatever reading mediums you give them. So the paradox that I presented before is that most of our books are read on the web, but the majority of pages are read on devices. And I don't know if I call it a web app split. It's probably the platform. If you think about the platform that you're carrying, the iPad in your lap, that's a great reading experience. And if you're going to sit down to a long-form reading session, that's probably what you pull out. But when you're at work, during your lunch break, you can actually read in your browser because that's there. And I think that people will read on whatever's in front of them. And so in our experience, given that the apps are on the devices today, the majority of reading's happening in the apps.
Okay.
But every book's being touched pretty much at every access point through the chain.
So with platforms, the big issue is always discovery, right? So how can publishers improve their discovery of their information? Is it better metadata, better titling? What can they do?
So on the discovery side, I'm very excited to help with book discovery. If you think about Google Books, where it's not just ebooks, but we're going after all of the books in the world, well, that becomes a huge problem of helping people find the exact book that answers their question. And metadata absolutely helps. So metadata is a challenge in that you don't always get everything you want in metadata. So, one example is a romance, and there's probably only 3 categories in BISAC that most romance novels get tagged with, but that's not enough to help somebody parse, what kind of book am I looking for? And I think, finer tagging would probably help a lot. And I think users can help here. And then just looking at book similarity and shelf. So it's just something on the algorithmic side, we'll try to get there. But if publishers could give us more information along those lines, I'd be in heaven.
Sure. Yeah. So last question I have for you, and it's kind of a broad question.
Sure.
But as we move forward into platforms and access, do you think that access is going to ultimately be more important than ownership?
So access versus ownership in terms of the user's perspective, that I trust that I can access this content anywhere at any point moving forward, versus I really have to own this and know that I've got it.
Right.
It's a great question, and this is one where I worry because, am I too old to parse this one? I come from the ownership society, right?
Sure.
I collected CDs and DVDs and VHS before then, and I've made the move to a Netflix world, where I now suddenly trust that if I want to watch something, I can reach out and touch it, and it's going to be there, barring some system failure.
Sure.
So I think I could get there with books. I just haven't seen that model yet, but that's pretty interesting to us.
Well, thank you very much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you for the time.